All right, in this video we're going to talk about evolution as genetic change. We're going to look at things like how does natural selection affect single gene versus polygenic traits? What is genetic drift? What are the conditions required to maintain genetic equilibrium, and how does that affect evolution? So first of all, how does selection work? Well, it has to do with fitness, if you remember from Darwin, and he defined fitness in evolution terms as success in passing genes to the next generation. Individuals that are best adapted and that mate more often are going to pass their traits on more often to the next generation. So on single gene traits, selection can produce changes in allele frequencies that can be reflected by simple changes in the phenotype frequencies. You can see this in our lizard population here. Initially, we have mostly green lizards with a few red and black ones. A volcano erupts in their habitat. We've got lots of this black lava, so the population shifts over time, and you go from mostly green to more black than green within 30 generations. In polygenic traits, you got three types of selection: directional, stabilizing, and disruptive selection. So directional selection is when individuals at one end of the curve, either the high end or the low end of the curve, have higher fitness than individuals at the middle or the other end, so it shifts the distribution one way or the other. You can see that on our graph. Stabilizing selection, the average individuals, the ones near the center of the curve, have higher fitness than the individuals at either end, so the population distribution becomes more narrow, and you can see that on the graph as well. And finally, disruptive selection, which is probably the rarest of the three. Phenotypes at both the upper and lower ends of the curve have higher fitness than individuals near the middle. And you go from a single peak to two peaks, what we call a bimodal distribution. And again, you can see that in our graph here. Genetic drift is the random allele frequencies changing due to chance. So both genetic drift and selection can cause evolution, whereas evolution is the environment determining which traits are going to become more common. And genetic drift, it's just random changes, random chance events. And we got two types, bottleneck and founder's effect. So the bottleneck effect is a change in allele frequencies following a dramatic reduction in population size. Something comes in and makes the population very small, which can severely reduce genetic diversity because there's going to be more interbreeding. They become more and more similar. This is pretty common with endangered species. And the founder's effect, allele frequencies change as a result of migration of a small group from the population. So you've got two groups leaving the main population that neither one of them represents the original population completely, so that over time their descendants have a different allele frequency than the population that they came from. So the question had been for a long time, scientists could kind of say, yes, it appears that evolution is occurring in this population, but we couldn't quantify that. And then two different scientists at the same time basically came up with the same idea called the Hardy-Weinberg principle. And it has to do with this idea of genetic equilibrium. And they came up with 5 assumptions that have to be met in order for the population to stay in genetic equilibrium. In other words, when the population is not evolving. This works really well for sexually reproducing organisms. So here's the 5 assumptions. Now, keep in mind that it's rare that natural populations meet all of these assumptions for a long period of time. So random mating. Every individual has an equal chance of mating. Large population size are there to reduce the effects of genetic drift. No migration, no individuals moving in and out, no mutation, and no selection. So if this rarely happens, how is it useful? Well, it gives us a way to measure evolution, and then allows us to look at which of these assumptions are not being met so that we can then determine what is the cause or causes of evolution in that population. There are 5 factors that cause evolution to occur. Non-random mating, where you have sexual selection, would be an example of this, where mates, typically females, choose their mate based on certain characteristics, performing a courtship ritual, having the best display, competition among males, things like that. Small population size, genetic drift is going to have a bigger impact. Gene flow is immigration, individuals moving in, or emigration, individuals moving out or exiting. the population. When that happens, they take their genes with them and can change the allele frequencies of the population. Mutations create new alleles, and natural selection can change the frequency of the alleles if there's something that's giving a particular allele an advantage, particular phenotype an advantage. So along with the assumptions, they came up with these equations where P and Q represent the frequency of the dominant and recessive alleles. And we'll talk more about how you use these to predict allele frequencies at a later point in time.